This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's always great to have visitors with us. To me, it's always fantastic to have them coming over from the Kashmir area. It's great to see the family from there. We are continuing our study in Ecclesiastes. We are in the 10th chapter this morning. We have 10th, 11th, and 12th chapters to go, and we'll be finished with this study. Solomon is continuing his thoughts on wisdom in this chapter. He is going to present this information in the form of short proverbs. Solomon is going to contrast wisdom with folly. What is folly? Well, folly is the lack of good sense or foolishness. So that's what he's going to be contrasting, wisdom or wise man against foolishness or foolish man. And we've seen that quite a bit in this study. So let's continue on. Get my... the first three verses, he's going to be talking about the advantages and disadvantages of wisdom. Verse 1, dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. Now this one, I've seen some faces when I read that. We hate flies. We hate them landing on us. We hate them especially when they land on our food because of what flies represent, and what flies do, and where flies go, and so it's really hard to think about this one. But we can be smart, make all the right decisions in our life, walk the straight and narrow, but all it takes is one stupid mistake, and you risk losing everything. Several years ago, I'm going to say back probably the early 90s, maybe 89, when we first got here, going out to the valley, we were going to go to the Union Gospel Mission downtown once a month and do a devotion for the men there. They invited us in early to tour the Union Gospel Mission, and it was nothing what I was expecting it to be. It was clean. It didn't have any foul odors. They take the clothes of the men who come in there and wash all their clothes for them. They feed them a meal, and then they have bedrooms for them. It's kind of like a dormitory. But we went and walked through the dormitory, and they have bunk beds, and there's a women's auxiliary who makes quilts for all the beds. So it looks kind of homey, and it's not a dormitory, type of affair. And then outside of that, they had a hallway with single bedrooms off of that for the men who had been there a while and had kept a job and was moving up, and hopefully were going to move out one day. And as we were walking down this hallway, I looked behind us, and there was a man, a big, tall, lanky man, following us. Well, I turned around and started talking to him. And he had come from Seattle. He used to be a baseball player for the Seattle Mariners. He had a real good contract, had lots of money, had a wife, had a family, had this big house and everything, was living a good life. But then he made one mistake. He got hooked on drugs. And he lost everything. And because of that, he was now in the gospel mission by himself. So all it takes is one mistake, and we lose everything that we've worked for. So we've got to be careful, brothers and sisters, that we don't make that mistake. Verse 2, a wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is on his left. The right hand, or some versions just state the right, represents the honor and glory, while the left represents folly, foolishness, and ruin. We see this example of the right hand and the left in the New Testament in describing the judgment. where the righteous will be like the sheep and escorted to the right hand of Jesus. But those who have not done the will of God will be escorted to the left like the sheep to hell. Again, the idea that the right is good and the left is bad. This goes along with Solomon's example of making right decisions, which leads to living a good life, and constantly making bad decisions will lead to a life of despair and misery. Verse 3, even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. Now, please take this statement the right way. Have you ever looked at somebody and you could tell what kind of a person they were by the way they acted or the way they carried themselves? This is what Solomon is stating here. You could tell a fool by the way he carries himself, by the way he walks, by the way he acts. He shows everyone who he really is. I worked at Lowe's in the tools and hardware department it was over the holidays. I think it was 2 or 3 months. And, we were supposed to look out for people who were coming in there and stealing tools. They would walk in and just grab a whole bucket or a box of tools and walk out with them. And so we were supposed to give them good customer service and watch out. And after a while, you get to see and you recognize these people, how they come in, how they act, how they dress, and you single them out. And so we would give them good customer service to try to prevent them, from stealing. And I have my name, several awards up on the wall from where I had stopped people from stealing things. But you get that way of recognizing people. Today they call that profiling, and that's a bad thing. But we do, And that's what Solomon is talking about here. Solomon stated that a fool shows everyone who he is by the way he walks. He lacks wisdom because of the way he carries himself. On the contrary, you could tell a wise man by the way he carries himself and the decision that he or she makes. Now, verses 4 through 7, Solomon is going to talk about humility and patience versus popularity and partiality. Verse 4, if the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for consolation pacifies great offenses. Solomon is telling us that if your boss comes to you and gets on to you for this or for that, whether it is true or not, to refrain yourself from temper and jumping back. I used to bite my tongue and I would get an upset stomach from it, from holding back what I was thinking. Believe it or not, I have a hot temper at times, and it seems to be getting worse the older that I get, But Solomon is telling us, not to jump on things like that. Solomon is telling us to be patient, to control your anger. He states to not leave your post or your position, pacify your want or need to jump back. I always tell people to be like a duck in water rolling off a duck's back. Don't let it affect you. And that sometimes is hard to do. We want to jump down the other person's throat for jumping on us, especially when it isn't warranted. But by standing your ground and keeping your mouth shut, you can prevent yourself from offenses. Maybe you're stopping yourself from saying something a Christian shouldn't say or doing something that a Christian should not do. Verses 5 through 7. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun. And remember, that's talking about on the earth. As an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. I have seen servants on horses, while princesses walk on the ground like servants. The world is not fair. I'm sure everybody will agree with that statement. We see people who don't deserve recognition, while the person who does deserve it does not get the recognition. Maybe a person comes up with a wonderful idea that somebody steals and takes it to the boss as their idea, and then they get the promotion. But the person who had that idea gets that other guy's job while he's hobnobbing with the bosses. Okay? This world is not fair. Maybe this person is always rubbing elbows with the supervisors and bringing in donuts for them to make good brownie points. But we need to be careful as Christians that we do not do things that are unchristian. Solomon has seen the evil under the sun, even back 3,000 years ago. Nothing is new under the sun. Verses 8 through 11, Solomon is going to talk about the inevitable risk versus inexcusable stupidity. Verse 8, he who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. He who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it if the axe is dull, and one does not sharpen the edge. Then he must use more strength, but wisdom brings success. Here Solomon gives us 4 short examples of the risk we take every day doing simple things and the possible outcomes from our stupidity. You could fall into a pit that you dig if you're not careful and you get too close to the loose edge. I am sure that you could think back in your life of some really stupid things that you have done. I'm going to share one with you. This is Gullfoss in Iceland. Beautiful falls. We used to go up there to it. It was 3 hours from the base. The water is being fed by a glacier that you can't see. And it comes down and goes through these falls and does a 90 degrees. And then it falls down into this crevasse and disappears back off to the right down in the corner. Well, right here, you can see this little indentation. There's a ledge that goes out through here, and it's hidden by the what am I trying to think of? The wind, anyway, the water droplets, the fog. But we were told that this waterfall would freeze solid during the winter. I said, there is no way that much moving water would freeze. About February, I think it was, we heard from somebody that Gullfoss was frozen. We got together with a family of ours, a friends with their 5 kids and our 3 kids, and he jumped in their caravan and I jumped in my Jeep Cherokee, and we drove up there. Took us 6 hours to get up there, which normally took 3 because we kept getting stuck in the snow. We get up there, and believe it or not, Gullfoss was frozen in time. Except right here, there was like about a 20-foot section that was still flowing. The rest of it looked as it is right there, but frozen. I couldn't find my picture of it, but this gives you an idea, and you can see how it is all frozen in time, like it just flash freeze and just froze. Well, I'm a photographer, and I wanted to climb out on that ledge and get a picture close up of that frozen waterfall. The ledge is about maybe 4 or 5 feet wide, and because of that mist, that's what I was trying to think of, it was solid sheet of ice. And I literally had to get on my hands and knees and hold on with my fingertips to not slip and fall off and go into the waterfall. And I go out there and I take a couple of pictures, and then I climb my way out, and I'm sitting as I'm doing this thinking, how stupid can you be? Because had I fallen off, I would have come down this area here, and then I was falling into that crevasse and disappeared down through that waterfall. My family would have seen me fall off and go into the waterfall. This is probably one of the most stupidest things I have ever done in my life for a picture. A picture I can't even find today, okay? But we have all done that. We have all done something stupid, okay? And that is what Solomon is referring to here, of doing stupid things. Solomon tells us in verses 8 through 10, that if we are not careful or wise, that we can all fall into the pit that we just dug, or get bit by a snake if we step into a cave that we just found, or have a large rock fall on us while we are mining, or cut our leg with a dull knife or dull axe. If we do not use the brain that God has given us. I didn't use my brain when I crawled out on that edge. Okay? The choice to be wise or foolish is up to us. Sometimes, like me on this day, we can be utterly stupid and get lucky and nothing will happen to us. But other times, we might not be so lucky, and we will pay the price of being stupid or foolish. In the long run, it is better for us to be wise than to fool. Verse 11, a serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. Other versions state that it a little bit differently, and they say the serpent might bite before he is charmed. There is no profit for the charmer. The purpose of a snake charmer blowing on the flute is to hypnotize the cobra so that when he comes up out of the basket, he's charmed and he's timid, so that the charmer can reach over and touch the cobra on the head and not get bit. But if he hasn't charmed it right, or he does something wrong and the snake comes out and bites him, he's not going to get any money for his show because he was stupid. He didn't charm the snake and he got bit. And that is what Solomon is talking about here. In the end, your foolishness will bite you. You will get the reward that you deserve. The babbler, the person who just runs on and on and on, is no different. Verses 12 through 14. To the end of the chapter, Solomon is going to get personal as he describes the fool himself. Solomon is going to describe him in detail, and at the end of the chapter, let's read what Solomon has to say about a foolish man and his talk. Verse 12, the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. A fool also multiply words. No man knows what is to be. Who could tell him what will be after him? Solomon starts off with how a wise man's mouth is gracious. His talk is suitable for the occasion, is understandable and appropriate. But a fool's words swallow him up. In other words, he talks himself into circles. Nothing he or she says makes sense. He goes on and on and on until he sounds like a raving maniac or a lunatic and a madman. A foolish man thinks more words are better to get his point across. You can't make sense of what he or she is saying. And I am sure we have all seen this or heard this happen to somebody. If someone else is there, you will look at each other and maybe raise your shoulders or an eyebrow in question of what is going on and what they are saying. The foolish person speaking just goes on and on. You are left to question what will come next. A fool's future is uncertain. What will happen to them if they stay on that uncertain path? Verses 14 and 15. Fools are their own worst enemy. Verse 15. The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. A fool works and works for nothing. I say that because sometimes you can interpret that as being they just steal. We have all seen videos of stupid crooks. There used to be a show that was out about that. And they showed this one guy going into the bank with his bike helmet on, his motorcycle helmet on, and to hold up the bank, and written above the visor was his name. So they knew exactly who it was. Or the guy who went into the bank and handed the teller a note demanding all of her money. And she gave it to him and he left, or she turned the note over and it was his deposit slip. Gave him his name and his address. I saw one this Friday here in Spokane Valley. A man called the police department, called 911 to report somebody had pulled a gun on him while he was stealing something from the guy's house. Yes, he was stealing from a man's house. The owner came out and pulled a gun on him. The thief calls 911 to report a man pulled a gun on him while he was stealing. Okay? Some people are stupid. Okay? Fools are stupid, and that is what Solomon is telling us. Foolish people can be stupid. Solomon is telling us that a fool is so stupid or clueless that they don't even know where they are. They don't even know how to get to the city. They can't make heads or tails of anything. Verses 16 through 17, fools make poor leaders. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princesses feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles, and your princesses feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Solomon is talking about fools that are leaders. I'm going to plead the fifth, and I'm not going to say anything. He is talking about wise men who are leaders. Solomon gives a simple example of eating. The fool prince feasts in the morning when the wise prince feasts in the correct time. The wise man eats for strength where the foolish man leader gets drunk. The foolish leader doesn't care about anything but himself and his wants, where the wise leader thinks about his leadership and his people. The same is true today. Verses 18 and 19, the foolish waste time and money. Because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers everything. The foolish are lazy in everything. Their building or houses are falling apart because they are lazy and have idle hands that doesn't make sense. They don't make simple repairs like a leaking roof. The foolish want to eat and make merry all the time, spending what little money they have on booze and food for themselves and their friends, but their families suffer in the meantime. Again, several years ago, I was out in the valley going up Sullivan and was going to turn west on the interstate. And on the entry ramp to go east, there was a man out there with his cardboard sign asking for money. Went and did my business, and I came back, and here he is walking down the street from the corner gas station with a big, I guess a 24-pack of beer. And in that triangle between Sullivan, the entry ramp, and the interstate, there was some trees and a bunch of bushes, which they have since cut down. But the homeless used to stay in that little triangle on the interstate. And he was carrying his beer from all the money that he had just raised to all of his friends for the night. This is what Solomon is talking about. This is what the foolish do. Their house, if they have one, is in decay because they don't care about that. They just care about themselves. And then the last verse, verse 20, fools can be dangerous. Do not curse the king even in your thought. Do not curse the rich even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. It is better for a wise man to keep his mouth shut than to say something about somebody else, and those words get back to the person. A little birdie overhears your bad comments about your boss, and before you know it, that boss is coming to you for a discussion about what you said. Or maybe the person you told is the boss's pet and runs back with all the little tidbits he or she hears to get you into trouble. Or maybe they get a promotion because of it. Or maybe the person you told runs and tells somebody else, and that person is the little birdie that goes and tells your boss. Solomon is telling us it's best to keep your mouth shut. A wise man knows not to do these things. Now that completes our study on chapter 10. That only leaves us with 2 more chapters to be finished with Ecclesiastes. But this brings us to our weekly spoiler alert. Solomon isn't talking a lot of negative in this chapter. He's giving us comparison on the wise and the foolish. But again, I still want to remind you, let us hear the conclusion of this whole matter, that everything Solomon is talking about. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is man's all. This is what we have got to do as Christians, to fear God and to keep his commandments. This is our all. If there's any way that we can help you this morning, let us know. If you are a Christian and you need the prayers of your family, we can do that this morning. We can pray for you. Or if you're not a Christian and that is something that you need, the baptistry is ready and we can take care of that sin problem as well. Please let your wishes be known as together we stand and sing.